All right. So today we'll be talking about cooperative financing and cooperative development. And I think even in the past with North Star sessions, we've just always known, realized, even like been told how those spaces can always be either triggering or just bring up some trauma or some things. Because if you think about like financial institutions of financing your work, sometimes if especially if we're like look at financing when it comes from like white institutions or whatever else, that comes with like a lot of heaviness in itself. And this cooperative work is beautiful, but also I feel like when we do this work and we talk about this work, it feels like almost you have to like bring people into your vision, or they may not fully understand your vision because it doesn't look a certain way. And so I just wanted to kind of build up that space up front for things to hold on to throughout our day, things to go back to. So whenever you start feeling anything in your body, just being able to reflect back to some of like the meditation this morning, some of the guided questions, asking about what nourishes you, also like holding space for yourself. So if you need to like step away, turn off the screen for a second, I don't know, like move out and listen to some Erica Badu, whatever brings you joy, just so you can make some time for yourself. Because I recognize this topic, like most of our topics, is heavy, but it brings a different kind of heaviness to it too. And so I just wanted to kind of recognize that and speak that. All right, so we're gonna transition into first, well, transition into the next thing. And so I hope a couple months ago when we first started this fellowship, I shared these cooperative development timeline cards. So if you do have physical copies, please bring them out. If you don't, that's fine. We have them on Jamboard too. Essentially, these cards talk about like how we build this cooperative work. And so we have all these different prompts about how we do this work. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into two groups, and I'm gonna stop sharing because I need my notes. We're gonna go into two groups for the next like 20 minutes. So essentially this tool was developed by Tessa, which is the Toolbox for Education and Social Action. They do some really amazing work. And Danielle Mkali, essentially thinking about like this cooperative development timeline and thinking about your cooperative work and like where it fits in or what you see, and just kind of having some guided questions or some guided ideas about like what this work will look like. Now, this is not a one all or fit all. It can be creative, you can add things, you can take away things, which is what I love about Jamboard. So each group will have access to a Jamboard with the cards, and please feel free to edit them or add prompts or add sticky notes or whatever your group chooses to do. So through this activity, we'll be working to really talk about the different steps in developing a cooperative. We'll be analyzing and discussing the different steps involved in this development, and also like taking time to talk about like the values and the context in relation to different steps in this development phase. We'll also be organizing the timeline. So right now, okay, cool, sorry. Right now it's slightly out of order. So you'll be deciding as a group what that order is and kind of like lining that up on Jamboard, and also talking about the different things that appear in that timeline and how it relates to your cooperative work. So are there any questions? Because I'm essentially going to send you into groups. So if there are any questions, please feel free to let me know. Sounds good. Cool. All right, thank you. Okay, cool. So we'll be in groups. We'll come back in about 20 minutes. So yeah, please feel free to play around with the timeline, discuss, just have to dig in, have fun with it, and then we'll come back and have some group discussion. I think I have to recreate the groups. All right. Oh, I also forgot to add this. So whoever's in room 1 will have this one, and room 2 will have the second link. Okay, cool. Now you have access to the Jamboards.
Did you want me to go in a room or?
It's up to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I just assigned it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hold on. Okay, cool. All right, y'all, welcome back. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. We're just gonna go through, I know you went through the timeline with your groups, but we're gonna go through the timeline again to just to see, or maybe we can have groups report out and you can share your screens. That might be easier. Then, okay. So I'm gonna invite groups to kind of share like how they placed their cooperative development timeline and kind of like what they were thinking when they were placing it, questions or discussions that came up. So I'm gonna just go in order, like with room 1. Do you wanna like talk us through your process?
Something. Just sorry, distracted by a noise. I will share our screen. So we had a lot of fun debating with how the order should go. But what we kicked ourselves off with was the idea. I think that's kind of how it started with us, at least. And we moved to getting organized and building trust. And then since we are in the age of technology, we duplicated one of the slides. So we actually added a secondary evaluation because we thought at this point it was a good time for all of us to take a moment to reflect, re-engage with ourselves interpersonally, and then with each other again before we moved into our fourth one, which was establishing governance structures. From there, we moved into the business planning. And this is where I think the debate got spicy because market research and the feasibility study and the evaluation all very much felt like part of the business plan to us. And then so then determining what order within the business plan, yeah, we this is what we landed on. Still don't know if that's what we'll stay with, but we ended up with market research first, I think feasibility study second, and then evaluation again. And for the last one, we said raising the necessary financing after we've done all of this process. That was us.
Thanks for sharing. I once again talked to myself muted. Anyway, yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, that was really great. I'm wondering if group 2, if you had a similar timeline or if you had something different, please feel free to share with us.
So I'm going to share my screen, but I'm going to need someone else from the group to talk because for some reason I can't talk while it's shared.
So should we talk about just the slide that we kind of had a discussion about, or should we go in order of the slides?
Yeah, so my question's around like what order did you have the slides in, but also if there's any discussion that came about while doing this, please also bring that into the space.
Well, one of the things that we talked about in our group, we were really examining like the structure and the governance card and just kind of going back and forth of how we strategize to hear all of the people in our organizations or participants.
Yeah, so I could chime in on that a bit too. We agreed that the way it was already mapped out was basically in order for us. But we did kind of land with where we are currently. And that is somewhere in between the idea and getting organized and building trust slides. But one thing that came out in discussion is how much we love sociocracy. No, but how Lupine, we've came to a decision to implement sociocracy as our decision-making structure. And we shared that with Jihan, and also got clarification from Nakuli on the difference between a decision-making structure and a governance structure, which I think was really insightful to learn that the governance structure would have more members or more board members and managers and such. Because I feel personally like that's where I've been stuck in not knowing the next steps to move forward. Like, do we decide on a governance structure or do we wait until we grow more to do that? But I think we were just in a place of processing where we are within those two slides. So I'm done speaking, y'all.
Great, thanks for sharing. Group 2. Okay. All right, so in doing this, I know like maybe it was Sarita with Lupine, you shared like where your cooperative steps are right now, which is the idea and the getting organized and building trust. But for the other cooperative groups in here, where do you feel like you are right now in the development timeline with your group?
I like this question because everyone in my group had a different answer. And I think they're all, which is, yeah, I think, so some of us said like, we're still really in the idea stage and really like solidifying the idea. Some folks said that we're getting organized and building trust. Some folks that we're doing market research, business planning. And I think, yeah, we're kind of in all of those things. I think just because of the nature of how our individual rhythms and heartbeats go. But we continue to, what's fun is me personally, I think we're in the evaluation place, which was different than everybody else, of course. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's fine. I think what I will say is that this cooperative development timeline, so there is no right order. I feel like maybe Tessa might say there is. But for the way we've done this in North Star is like there is no right order. It's whatever order the cooperative decides to engage in. And so if for your co-op, it is like you want to, step one is the idea stage, and also these stages might happen simultaneously. So you might be getting your idea together, but you might already be fundraising, or you might be getting your idea together and you might be, I don't know, already have some kind of business plan that you're starting with. So I think just like when it's spelled out like this, when the steps are spelled out, it kind of gives a better idea of like what is needed or what can be included in this process. But this is also not like the end all be all. There's so much more that can happen in these processes too. Any other groups want to share like where they feel they are in the cooperative development timeline?
Sleepy friends, wake up. Maybe Charles can sing to y'all. Do you need a good morning song? Maybe they need a good morning song.
Live my life from different places, like a space cadet. Folks on planet Earth, that's like love, the hardest thing to get to. Spirit must reside in my flesh because the sunlight's here. People of a strong nation, we must strive to manifest truth. I listen to the birds as they sing out that the time is now. We're headed for the ending. If this thing, I think I forgot the words.
Good morning. I'm gonna mute now so they can continue.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful.
I like that y'all drew out the evaluation phase happening multiple times. I definitely feel like that is a constant, or yeah, we're revisiting that often.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. It's nice to have some place to go back to check in, see like what you've done so far, what you haven't done, what else. Thank you. What else might you be doing, etc. So I did like that, and like the fact that technology allows us to do that. But also in the, I guess in the future, like thinking of printing out like multiple cards because maybe these things happen over and over again at different times. So like that too. All right, I'm going to close out with some final debrief questions, and then we'll just kind of move into lunch. So, and I know folks are maybe, I don't know if it's tiredness or what it is, maybe low energy, but like, but just kind of invite you all to kind of talk or add in the chat or give like I don't know, some kind of reaction. But what are some of the major takeaways after doing this development timeline?
Well, I think for me, it definitely helps with the temperature check of where I am in time in my space and an organization and what I'm striving to do. And I think it helps kind of like a meter or like a temperature check. So I really do appreciate these graphics and the cards.
Great, thank you. One more takeaway. I want to learn more about what each step looks like. What does a feasibility study look like? That's a great question. So the next person that's coming on, Christina, they work a lot more with conversion cooperatives. If you ask that question to Christina, she'll have a great answer for you. Yeah.
I had a question, sorry, for Lupine about sociocracy, if you could speak to what that is, because I've never heard of that and I wanted to know more.
Yeah, Sarita speaks really well about this, but she's been talking about it all day, so I'll jump in. But if you have anything to add, Sarita, feel free. Sociocracy is like a peer governance structure based on consensus. And so as we're like making proposals or making decisions, we're checking in with each person in our founding group. And we're excited about it because as you grow, it's really set up for like multiple small groups to be able to make consensus-based decisions within themselves and then bring that to the whole group, so that the whole group like understands where that decision came from and can sort of like ratify it. So it's set up to like scale really well, but also like prioritizes community and like listening, like really deep listening. If anybody in my group has anything to add, you can jump in.
Thank you.
And if there's not a consensus decision, if one part of the group just has, just one little thing that they want to change, we then take it back to everyone and we just kind of reformulate so that everybody's on board and everybody's comfortable with every aspect of what we're doing.
And I think I'll just say that what makes it unique is the rounds and hearing every voice or all of the voices being represented through rounds. And that's how you get to the consensus of how you like to move forward with whatever decision you're making.
Great, thank you for sharing. I think that's a very on point way to make decisions, especially when thinking about this cooperative work, because you're not doing it alone or with other folks and wanting to take care through the decision making process. I really like that. Thank you. Speaking of some questions that was asked in the chat, are there any other questions that came up for people as they were going through this through the timeline? None. That's okay. If there is any questions, we can answer them later. Is there any particular phase that you're excited about undertaking, or is there a phase that makes you feel anxious or uncertain?
think personally, I'm very, very excited about feasibility studies. I love the opportunity to kind of experiment and I don't know, I like making room for learning and surprises and testing out and experimenting.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the group? Any phases that you're particularly excited about?
I love an evaluation, girl. That's my jam. Read me down. Let's read each other down, and also give each other hugs and stuff. I mean, I'm geeked for all of it because I'm just geeked because this is what I want to do with my life. That's just where I'm at, child. I'm also excited about feasibility studies because Lane just had a brilliant idea, and then the pun dawned on me, and I just can't wait to
Anything from you, Kyle?
So, hearing excitement about evaluation and feasibility studies. I think you'll be in great company with our next speaker. So, and I want to say that Liana is our evaluation like queen for North Star and other work too that she does outside of Nexus. So, you're also in really good company there too. Sarita, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm curious about market research as it relates to what Lupine is trying to do. I don't really, we don't have no competition, you know? So I'm like, you know, y'all know. So yeah, I mean, we got barriers, but we trying to, you know, anyway, I'm a little loose today, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. So wait, what is your question again? I got distracted.
It wasn't really a question. I guess I'm just curious about it. Like I guess if there is a question, it's how do we apply market research to what it is that we're trying to do?
Right. Okay. I mean, I think as you're going through the questions too, like trying to see, well, you talked about, well, the barriers, who is the target? I know the word clientele, but like who are the target members of this cooperative? So I think that's ways to think about market research, the demographics for the area or for your cooperative. I mean, we've talked about in the past, it's been mentioned like an all-Black cooperative. Is that what you're looking for or not looking for, etc.? But also, I think in terms of competition, because you are all thinking about a land trust model. Are you thinking about a land trust model? Am I remembering that correctly? But I just remember when, oh gosh, I remember forgetting her name, Micaiah Griffin from Rondo was here. She was talking a lot about like how there are all these different land trusts in Minnesota. And so if you're thinking about your work, like and also I do want to note that I think I reflected on that conversation. And while yes, there are some land trusts in Minnesota, your land trust would be different. And all those land trusts, Rondo, PIP, all started out as an LLC. So if you wanted to register your land trust as that and then go from there, you can structure it how you want to, regardless of like what's already available in the area, because you have a different vision for your work. And so I think that's kind of the thing too, thinking about like maybe what are the current offerings with PIP, Rondo, and I know they're like land trusts in greater Minnesota too, but like what is different for you? What are you thinking about if that's still the vision and the goal? I see Jahan saying you're gonna have to spend time with your cards. That's fine. Are there any parts of this that you feel anxious about? I know we've talked about business plan versus cooperative plan, and these cards were like made before that. So I just wanted to like recognize that some language changes, and you'll probably be hearing some of that language too from Christina when she comes on. Or are there phases where you think you might need extra support?
I'm thinking we might need extra support when it comes to financing just because we're also considering a nonprofit in addition to a cooperative. We're talking about a lot of ideas, but that I know is like a whole different ball game when it comes to financing. So I don't know if Nexus can support us with that, but that's what I'm just thinking about right now.
Yeah. And I think depending on, that's a great, like, question to have. And I think depending on your financing, I mean, we've talked about like we have different, we'll talk about this more too when Christina comes on, but there's different ways people get their cooperatives financed. And I think that kind of talks about it in that slide too. Whether it's like shares or raising funds through grants, loans, donations. We heard about that story in the Arc of Justice, and I mean that story exists. Elda Make, one of the ways that she raised her cooperative her financing for her cooperative was through, like, she did a GoFundMe that was on for like a while, but she also was writing grants and all these other things too. And I think, yeah, you can for sure have like a nonprofit and a cooperative. That's how Root Spring Co-op is structured. They're a nonprofit and a cooperative. And gosh, what's that? I know they just changed their name, but what used to be Village Financial Cooperative, the Black Credit Union in the North Side, that's still coming. I think they changed it to Arise or something. They have a nonprofit structure and the cooperative credit union bank. And so one of the ways is oftentimes, I will say philanthropy because that's what philanthropy doesn't always fund co-ops. There are some that are funding, but I feel like a lot of the times, even like the McKnights or whatever, kind of still like paddling into the field. So what they will do is fund the nonprofit and use some of those nonprofit expenses in the cooperative in some way that's legal and good for the books. So you can like get grants through the nonprofit side of things. So yes, there is a way to do that. And I will say that I don't know if we mentioned this. We do have alumni funds. Now, this is not like large scale financing. Alumni funds, as you all think about this work. So if you want to hire a consultant to help you with your feasibility studies, there's money for that. If you want to hire someone to help you do your websites, etc., there's money to do that because you've taken part in this fellowship. And also we do fiscal sponsorships at Nexus. I believe we're at capacity right now. But one of the conversations we did have was that, well, I don't know. We had a cooperative group come to us a few cohorts ago. They wanted to be our fiscal sponsor. We didn't have a process. So we have a process for cooperatives and nonprofits. If you didn't want to become a nonprofit ever, you wanted to be a cooperative, you'd still could get fiscally sponsored by Nexus. But I believe we're kind of at capacity right now. So I think as other groups move off, then there might be room, and I can keep folks updated if they email and ask. Cool. And I will follow up the session with that alumni fund little one pager that we have of like things that we ask for. It's just that you have a cooperative group, you have an advisory committee, and you've at least met 3 times. And if you want to like start diving into some of that work, hiring a grant writer, whatever you're thinking of in terms of your co-op, we could talk about that. Feel free to let Liana and I know. All right, y'all. So we have gone through that. I want to recognize that I think it is time for lunch. So please hold on to those cooperative development timelines. Please go back to them. Please use them for your final projects if needed. Yeah, and if you do have any more questions, we have those one-on-ones set up. Also, you can also just come, we could grab, coffee, either in person or virtual. We could grab coffee and talk about this work. That's what we're here for. So yeah, please make sure you go back to them, use them, reference them. They're for you as you continue your cooperative journey. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna go into a break. We'll be back at 12:30, where Christina Nicholson from Worker Ownership Initiative / Shared SOCAN. I don't know, they just changed their name.
Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. Yeah.
Yep. They'll be joining us to kind of talk more about this cooperative development, but also financing. We'll be looking at spreadsheets and budgets and all those types of things. So yeah, please take some time, come back at 12:30, and we'll get going for part 2. Thank you all for participating in this. Truly appreciate it. Start the. All right. I see some reactions. Cool. Thank you. Okay, cool. Hey, y'all, welcome back from break. I hope you're able to get something nourishing for yourselves. I'm gonna pass it to Liana to introduce our incredible speaker for this afternoon.
Thank you, Nicole. So welcome back, Christina, our colleague at Nexus, from the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. And so we had Christina and Benjamin back in January, and Christina's back to talk with us about financing. And I'm just going to briefly read her bio just to reacclimate her to the space. So Christina has been working in cooperatives in Minnesota for 25 years in a wide range of roles, from front of house retail to construction to cooperative consulting. In all of her endeavors, the thread has been working to connect communities to each other through common cause. This has been framed for Christina as a shared economy that questions the normative culture of the unequal exploitation of labor. Rather than focus on what is wrong, cooperatives look to inspire a shared sense of success and equity among community members within the cooperative. When done well, cooperatives celebrate the unique contributions of individuals while challenging assumptions about how we perpetuate destructive myths around gender, race, and class. She's so excited to be part of Nexus and looks forward to learning from her peers who continue to inspire her with their vast knowledge of community wealth building, leadership, and development of strategic partnerships. When not at work, Christina likes to spend time with her wife, their dog, and their daughter when she is home, all while making food, growing food, sharing food, and arguing about who is doing the dinner dishes. Welcome back, Christina. Thank you for being with us again today.
Oh, thanks so much, Liana. Thanks, Nicole. So grateful to be in space with all of y'all today. And I know it's a smaller group. The information I'm going to present today, I have a PowerPoint that I want to take you all through. The PowerPoint will be shared. So there's a couple of things I would encourage to bring into the space today. One is all questions. So I don't get thrown off if people have questions in the middle of a slide or when I'm talking. So please jump in. I think it's really valuable for this to be interactive. And of course, all presentations and all learnings are iterative, right? So I trust your knowledge, and you bringing that into the space and asking questions is always really valuable to me. The other thing I will say is when I met with Nicole and talked a little bit with Liana kind of after our last presentation, there's kind of two drivers, right? One, to kind of learn about finance, but also to kind of understand what is different or what can be different about cooperatives from a more extractive capitalist economy. So I tried to be intentional about that. That being said, I think the best resource I can offer is on the last slide. I have some resources for you all to tap into. I attended a 4-day course from Maroon University out of Chicago last year, and it offered me up a lot of material and learnings around solidarity economy. So I included that at the end. I want you all to have some basic financial knowledge, and I'm totally down to unpack capitalism, but we only have an hour and a half. So we'll do the basics today, and happy to follow up or answer questions and dig it more into the material if there's interest there. So with that, does anybody have any questions from the jump before we get started? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna jump into sharing screen. Thank you for that. Can you all see this okay? But, okay, so what we're gonna talk about today is both values and value and how you bring those two things together through financial tools. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to ask you all a question, which is what is something you learned from your family about how to define success? So if I can get like 2 or 3 answers, that would be great.
We have in the chat from Sarita, overworking.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
From Jehan, status or title.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are both good ones.
With an addition of wages, question mark from Jehan. So
Yeah, I was gonna say my family was all about how much money you made and that everybody should know it by looking at you. Right. Any others?
from Olivia, constant climbing, a farm called home, getting a college degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all those are real, and I think we get a lot of those messages. One of the most empowering and challenging things about cooperatives is that you as an organization, through your mission statement and through how you engage with cooperative members, define what success looks like for your cooperative. So some of what we're focusing on today is numbers, right? But the numbers are neutral. It is what lens you bring to those numbers that affect how you all decide within your cooperative, how you're going to define success. I have found that cooperatives have been very liberating for me because I realized that my success is not just for me, it is for my community. It is for the folks I'm in community with, either cooperatively or in geographical space or both, right? So I think one of the great things about becoming an adult is that I have found spaces where I can define success for myself. And it's not necessarily how my family defines success, right? But that's okay. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. So for today's agenda, we're going to talk about financial management basics. We're going to talk about budget versus actuals. We're going to talk about profit and loss statements, and we're going to talk about cash flow. We're also going to talk about key performance indicators because it's important, especially when new folks come into a cooperative, to understand how they're contributing to the well-being of the cooperative, how their work is valued, and how the values of the organization tie out with the work that they're doing, right? So you want to be really transparent in that. So then we're also going to talk a little bit about connecting our cooperative values to the value of the cooperative. And then there's some resources at the end for new cooperatives as well, just for funding opportunities. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So the first thing I wanted to ask, I know it's a lot of questions, but I want to get a vibe kind of on where you all are at, because we all have such different experiences, right? What is an example of a budget that you have seen just out in the world? What's an example of a budget you've seen?
Mujahid says budget versus actual.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good one. For some of us that are old, the budget I used to see was my grandparents' checkbook. When I was in my 20s, my budget was sticking my ATM in the card, sticking my ATM card in the ATM, trying to get $20 out for the weekend, hoping that I had enough money to get that 20. And if I didn't, it would give me my balance and that would tell me how much I could take out. So that was also kind of a budget, right? Let's be real. So let's talk about financial management. We're going to get into budgets a little bit. So when you define financial management well, it's when an organization a cooperative uses all of its resources intentionally, right? So one of the drivers is intentionality in ways that achieve its mission, right, and goals while creating profit for its members. One of the ways that I'm trying to have this lens of like capitalism and cooperatives and where they intersect and where they don't is that your mission drives the reason that you exist, right? And so if part of your mission is to derive profit or derive money for your shareholders, right? That's going to cause you to make different decisions, like, I don't know, not repairing your train tracks when you need to, right? So, yep. I'm looking at you, Ohio. So your mission can present for you a lot of opportunities to understand why you all exist in the first place and what the money you're making is going to be used for, right? So it starts with mission, and then you get into the goals. How are we as an organization going to meet the mission of our organization to serve in community in the ways we want to? That's what goals are for. The profit is so that members are able to experience an equitable share of their work, right, in relation to the cooperative. So it is less extractive simply by the mission you make. That mission is the lens through which everything else you do moves through. So when you're in times of crisis, when you're in times of doubt, it's always an opportunity to go back to that mission and say, what is the right decision to make to live into the fullest experience of our mission and values? So for these three key financial management tools, budget, profit and loss, and cash flow, these are some of the things that it'll help the co-op do, right? Plan for the future and adjust course. If some decisions in the past haven't been the right ones, it helps you change that up. How do you know if you're making a profit so that the business can continue to grow and expand? And whether this is a housing cooperative, whether this is an actual retail business, whether this is a creative space, y'all, we still all got bills. So you need to make sure that you're able to meet those needs. And then how can you decide what you can afford to buy or spend? A lot of times cooperatives operate where some of the profit goes back to the members, some of the profit is retained to grow the business, and then frequently they'll have another nonprofit partner or community partner that they want to make a donation to as well. So you need to be holding this as values and outcomes that you want to achieve. And so this is kind of the roadmap that helps you do that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is budget. So budget is what, as you may expect, what you all think you're going to make. So at the top line is your sales. Then you lay out what you think all your expenses will be, and you're projected to have a net profit of $2,500. Well, here's the real world, right? One of the things that I always work with folks to talk about is, if you look at this one, you actually made $2,000 more for sales than you thought you were going to. So for a lot of folks, they would see this and think, bet we've got $2,000 more dollars. But to make that 12,000 instead of the 10,000, you'll notice that it took a lot more payroll to do that. So if you look at this, the 5,000 out of the budget is half of the expense, half of the budget, right? So half went to payroll, and this actuals, it's actually 2/3 that went to payroll. So these are the kinds of things you have to juggle. It also costs more to make that money, so you had more supplies, and then utilities, for whatever reason, were off the chain. It could have been that you had a annual insurance payment, for example, that got categorized as utilities. So nobody expected that expense, and when it hit, you had to pay it. So the short version is why budgets to actuals matter is that even though you made more money, when you look at the bottom line, the company lost $2,000. So it isn't just about what you make, it's about how you spend to make what you make, right? So you always have to be paying attention to both of those things. So to do that, right, we move from budget and actuals into the profit and loss statement, which in many ways is just a much higher level of that budget. So profit and loss tells you the financial history of your business. it can tell you if your business is profitable and compares your revenue and expenses over time. So instead of just having 1 month, you can have a quarter, you can have a year, you can have multiple years. And it's a good tool to determine the financial health of your business. So again, this is kind of a basic example, and we just used budget, right, and moved it into this format. So for income and expenses, P&L is profit, which is some people see that as the revenue line, and loss, everything that you spent. At its core, profit and loss is basically either you made a profit or you posted a loss, right? So you're unpacking all these things to determine that. So sales 10,000, kind of the same drill. You see the expenses, net profit 2,500. This is actually what most profit and loss statements look like. I'm going to walk you through it just really top line. And I know we have a wide range of experiences. So if this seems really basic, I apologize. If this seems really confusing, happy to answer questions. So first of all, you always want to have a period of time. So this is an annual, whoops, there we go. This is an annual statement because it's October 11th through September of 2012. I'll let them in. So this is all of your income. Frequently, you may have multiple income streams. You might have a grant, for example, if you're just starting out, or maybe you have 2 different kinds of businesses within this cooperative structure. So you can have multiple lines of income. Then if you're a retail or you're making something, you can have a cost of goods sold. And then you have your gross profit. So these are all the expenses. And when you're starting your cooperative, it's really helpful to sit down and think about what are all the expenses that we're going to have to attend to. And for some folks that can coming together, that can be insurance. If it's a housing cooperative, it can be some kind of repair and maintenance budget for the property, so that you have an understanding of being very transparent when folks buy into this housing cooperative. There likely will be, over time, some increase in rent because you need to be planning for things like roofs, landscaping, all those things, right? Pipes are going to bust. So you have to be intentional about planning for these things. So this is really you starting to take this idea of your cooperative and ground it in the physical plane of how are we going to make this co-op work? What do we think we're going to make for income? And then what are all the expenses, including paying ourselves, that are going to come out of that? So once you list all your expenses, you add them all up, and in the plan, this number up here, total income, should be bigger than this number, your total expense, right? So sometimes this net ordinary income can come from, this is kind of your baseline, how much you have left. Over time, it can get more complicated. You can worry about your interest income. Maybe you got miscellaneous income because you all held an event and people just donated cash to you one time at this event. So you count it as miscellaneous income. So at the end of the day, you want to come down to your net income number. I hope when you guys are done and you look at the slide, really it is, for me, a way of operationalizing the co-op and making it real in some different ways. So that's why I get so excited about it. So let me get back in here. Okay. So when we're looking at profit and loss statements, what you're really looking for is you're looking for trends. So my undergrad is English literature, and then I got an MBA. So that arc there is that both of these tell a story, right? Your profit and loss statement over time tells the story of what your goals and aspirations were and what you actually did in relationship to those goals and aspirations. So this is a truth teller, right? This is a sage in your midst that you want to have a good, healthy relationship with, because she's not going to lie to you. You know what I mean? If you do it right. So for October, November, you see that the sales trend, it grew by 20%. That's great. Payroll increased by 40%. Supplies went up 20%, and then utilities went up as well. So you see here that there was a change both in income, and then there was a change in expenses. So your net profit, even though, again, you made more money, even though you made more money in November, you actually had less profit. And again, I think for folks that are starting out and folks that you invite into your cooperatives, having some basic understanding of these finances is important. When I was young, all I knew was like, if my co-op made $10 million, I was like, bet we're loaded. Where's my cut, right? And the reality was I didn't understand the difference between our revenue, right, and what our net income was. So that's always a valuable learning opportunity to invite folks into, right? Same thing when you get your paycheck. You may get a paycheck and your paycheck might be $700, but if your rent's $650, right, and you haven't paid to keep your lights on yet, you're still broke. So it's really just that concept in a business setting. I'm not saying all those are from personal experience, but all those are from personal experience. So the difference between a profit and loss statement and cash flow. Cash flow is the balance of the cash received minus the amount of cash paid out over a period of time. It's also sort of the story of how cash moves in and out of the business. Cash flow projection specifically is a separate financial statement from your profit and loss that tries to show how cash is expected to come in and then how it's expected to go out over a period of time. And it's used to see if your projected sales or receipts will be enough to cover your projected expenses. A lot of times this comes into play, not necessarily when you're starting up, though it can, but like, say you have an opportunity to move into a new space and you have to figure out if you're going to have the cash flow for like first and last month's rent on that new space. Or say that you're part of an artist collective and you formed a cooperative and you want to put on a very large production that's going to require you hiring outside folks, building sets. You need to understand whether or not what you're charging, the revenue you might make for that performance or for doing that work, or the grant that you receive will cover all of the expenses and then what's going to be left, right? So the main theme here is that a business can still be profitable and run out of cash, right? So you have to make sure that you're not writing any funky checks and that any commitments you have, like payroll, for example. I worked at a co-op where we had to check the cash balance in the checking account every morning when we got up to see if we were going to meet payroll, right? It can get that real. So it's something to keep in mind because you have to track your expenses. So cash flow statement, this looks a little bit like somewhere between a budget and a profit and loss statement, right? So this cash flow statement will always have a window. So you're comparing a window of time. If you look at this one, you see that it's cash flow statement as of August 31st. And so you start with what you have in your bank or what you have in your credit union on the 1st of August. So you had 15,000. You knew that you were going to get paid 20,000 over the month. You also knew that you were going to get a grant, a little something grant from a neighborhood business. So you added that in. Then you had to figure out how many folks were working at the co-op that you were going to have to cover payroll and purchase any supplies or anything that co-op needs. So based on this, what this cash flow showed without breaking down any of the individual supplies was that there was a positive net cash flow from operations. So what you know is when you're looking at September, you have $2,000 in cash built up over the month of August that you can carry forward. If this had been a negative 2,000, it doesn't mean that the co-op is broke either. Maybe you had cash from previous months, and so you're deducting this from cash. So it's always going to be a snapshot, but it's never going to tell you the whole story. So it's why you need multiple ways of looking at your business in order to understand whether or not you're being successful and able to run as a business, right? So that was a lot of information and I talked really fast. Do you all have questions?
I have a question
Great.
just about this particular slide. So
Yes.
it's saying that the business is starting off with $15,000 and at the beginning of the month and ending with $2,000.
Oh, that's a great question. So no, it's saying that you started with 15 and at the end of the month, oops, sorry, you're actually going to have 17. So
Okay.
here's why, right? So this is like you have your flat line, what's in the bank. you're going to get that 20,000 in, you're going to get that 2,000 in. So you're going to add $22,000 to that 15,000. So if somebody looked at that, they'd be like, we're balling, we have $37,000. But that doesn't tell the whole story. So then you put in your expenses of 20. So out of this equation, you made 2,000. So you'll be up to 17 when you start in September. And that's actually a really great question. So thank you for that.
There's a chat from a Jahid who says the role a chart of accounts plays in producing a budget, profit and loss, and balance sheet. A brief description of the terms, income, expense, asset, liability, and equity, and a description of accounting basis, cash versus accrual.
Okay. Well, let's get into it. I'm going to unpack that. So I'm going to go down here and I'll kind of walk you through the role of a chart of accounts. So as I'll describe it, and Nicole and Liana, I know you also do budgeting for the organization, so please jump in with your knowledge as well. I think of a chart of accounts as basically how over time different people track different expenses. Chart of accounts is typically a number system that is assigned to individual line items. So every month, you know what goes in this bucket. So for example, payroll, let's say the code for payroll is 2080, right? So every month in your chart of accounts, there's a number called 2080, and everything that you pay out to people who are working goes in that 2080 account. So over time, if you want to know how much payroll you've spent this year, you go to that line 2080 and it'll tell you payroll and only payroll for the whole year. It won't have that one time we've got highlighters. It won't have that one time somebody needed a cash advance to buy this thing for the business. It won't have revenue. It will just have that one piece of information. So what's great about a chart of accounts is that it tells you in no uncertain terms, these are the things that go in this number and nothing else. If you don't have that, then what happens if you have more than one person doing the books, right? Or more than one person tracking your expenses and tracking your revenue? Opinions get in there, right? So chart of account is one way to kind of limit the opinions and keep some consistency in how your books look. And that ties out right to your profit and loss. So I'm going to go back just for a second, because I think this will help make sense of that. So when you see all these expenses, right? This is a lot of information. How do they keep track of all these different lines? It's because in a chart of accounts, payroll, is always going to have that 2080 assigned to it. So you go in, you look at 2080, you look at the month, that's what that total is. Utilities will have a line item assigned to it. So it helps you over time build out information in that one category. It's just a way of categorizing what you do, right? So that is how that chart of account plays into this. Sometimes people call it a COA. Sometimes people, like a bookkeeper, will call it coding. Like if you've ever worked for a business and you've ever been a buyer and they've said you need to write the code in, or you need to write when you receive this and the date, it's so they know which bucket to put it in. So think of chart of accounts as buckets, right? So for income and revenue are typically interchangeable. It is all the money you bring in. So whether you call it what you make, whether you call it income, whether you call it revenue, whether you call it sales, it is all the positive cash flow that is coming to you for your model. If you're running a housing cooperative, that would be all of the rent that you aggregate for the building, right? So expense is anything you pay out, whether it be payroll, whether it be a light bill, whether it be supplies. So like maybe you're running a carpentry cooperative and it's the expenses, it can either be a cost of goods, like buying all the wood, whatever it is that you have to spend to keep your cooperative going, that's an expense. An asset is something that is, for lack of a better term, and this gets into balance sheet, which I didn't cover today, but I'll talk at a really high level. An asset is a positive, right? So an asset is anything that you can turn into cash or is cash. It's something that available to you that you either own or have access to. A liability is an expense, right? So asset tends to be revenue based. Liability tends to be expense based. Equity is anything that you have in the business that isn't an asset or a liability. Typically, an equity base can be if you form a cooperative and people buy in, they purchase stock. That stock purchase that they make is considered equity. So it's not generated by sales and you don't have to pay it out right away. It is money or investment that's building over time. And then accounting basis, cash versus accrual. The easiest way I can explain this is that frequently people run on a cash basis when they start their business. And that is, I have $5,000. I got to pay these bills. I need to find out what I'm going to have next month in order to anticipate what I'll have available for me in cash. Accrual usually comes into place when you have some assets, computer equipment, maybe a car, maybe cooking equipment, where you have bought them outright, right? So you spent $14,000, but rather than saying, I'm just subtracting $14,000 from cash, it is, the way I think about it is like, if you've spent this $14,000, you got this kitchen stuff in, you do what's called depreciation. So even though you've spent this money and you have these things, they still hold value, right? So I give the example of like, let's say you bought a really nice turntable and then you decide you want to get married and you need to get some cash, right, to buy a ring. You could sell that turntable. You're not going to get the $800 that you spent on it, but you might get $500, right? So that depreciation is the difference between the brand new turntable of $800 and selling it for $500. It's depreciated by $300. The reason we have accrual accounting is so that you can account for things like depreciation. Things will still hold value, but it won't be as much value as they used to have. I'm going to stop that there. Does that make sense? Any questions? I had a babysitter who used to go to the pawn store a lot, so that's when I learned about depreciation. All right. These are great questions. Please keep them coming. Any other questions in the chat or anything else? Cool. All right. This is awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So let me get back up in here. So now we're going to talk about key performance indicators. So when I was starting out in my, not anticipating it would be a career, when I was starting out working in cooperatives, I was 23. And the question for me was always like, well, how do I know if I'm doing a good job, right? You have your boss kind of standing over you saying, do this, don't do this, whatever. But if your driver is to make the world a better place, if your driver is to opt out of a capitalist system that devalues people, if your driver is to try and generate wealth for your community, to create healthier and more sustainable living environments by having folks own property and grow their own equity, how do you know how to do that? And when you join an existing cooperative, how do you know that what you're doing is the right thing? So that's where KPIs come into play. So KPIs are another way to say key performance indicator. It's different than a metric like a profit and loss statement in that it is related to the goal or the objective of the mission of the organization. And so it's got something attached to it. If somebody says, well, how are your sales? If you're like, well, my sales are 20% higher than they were last year. Great. That doesn't tell me anything. What do your expenses look like? Maybe you're a hot damn mess. I don't know. I just know you grew 20%. But if you say, you know, how many staff have you retained in the last year? We've not only retained 100% of our existing staff, we've grown our co-op by 3 more worker owner members, right? That tells me something. That tells me like, oh, it seems like you're a pretty healthy organization and you have a good law of attraction going. Like that tells me something, right? So it's not just a measurement, which can be good or bad, right? That example of growing 20%, that didn't tell me anything. And it's only valuable in the context of the mission of the organization, the goals that the organization has agreed upon. So key performance indicators can help your co-op answer these questions. Is the work an individual is doing or that the group is doing aligned with the goals of the cooperative? How do we know if the cooperative is successful? And am I or are we doing a good job? Your key performance indicators are made by you all, right? They're made by the cooperative. They're made by the members of the cooperative. So what you value, what is important to you, is what you use as a baseline to create your key performance indicators. So I put this chart up, and again, it'll be in the slides when you all look at it. One of the questions of how are we doing something different in a cooperative outside of normative, extractive, capitalist culture? This is a really seemingly innocuous but powerful slide, because at the core of every decision you make is your cooperative values and principles. So the business plans, the strategy, what your members need, how you create value, how your members of the cooperative have their voice, all of this is framed through this cooperative values and principles. And that's why it's so important. And I know you all do a lot of work around doing your mission, understanding how to develop a mission and a driver that has impacts beyond just meeting your needs economically. So that's where this comes from. So you have your cooperative values and principles, and then why your cooperative exists. So its purpose and its mission. Based on meeting with members, you determine what it is that your cooperative does to deliver on its mission and purpose, right? Using member voices along the plan for the business plan, you decide how you're going to measure and communicate that performance. And it is the performance against or in relationship to what your cooperative does and what it is doing to deliver on its purpose and mission. This creates that member value, and then it goes back to your members to determine why you exist and what you're going to keep doing. So this is all connected. Anyone can say, I'm going to make as much money as possible. I have no interest in whether or not it impacts anybody else's health or anything else. Great. Go be a stock bro and post up on YouTube. And eventually, karma will come calling for you. If you decide that you're part of a community and you hold these community values in common, this can help drive how you express by tracking these metrics that you're having the impacts in community that you want to have, right? It makes it fully transparent. And I would argue it allows other people to feel more comfortable being invited into your cooperative so that they're not having to start from the beginning, right? You all are taking these courses. You all are operating in a cohort because you are sharing knowledge and growing knowledge. Key performance indicators are one more way that when you invite people into your culture, when you invite people into your cooperative, it's clear how they're making a difference. It's clear to them. It's clear to you. It's clear that they're there because they want to make a difference. And it's clear there is a vibe there that is fully transparent and engaged. And that is something that, in my experience, lives pretty far outside capitalist culture. So here's some examples. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a name in the chat. There's a chat from Kenna that's saying liberation as a key performance indicator.
It does. So I think that is one of the most powerful things you can talk about. Yes. Yep. Open books is a great way to do that. Liberation is a key performance indicator. Let's talk about what that looks like. Does that mean economic liberation so that people can have self-determination, where they want to live, how they want to live, access to the food that they want to buy, ability to care for their family members, ability to cover that medical bill, ability to live in a way that feels healthy and positive in whatever way they define it. So when you talk about liberation, what the opportunity is to really have radical imagination right? About what that looks like. And that radical imagination can be as radical as you can possibly make it. And you can still tie it to specific outcomes. That to me is like, people can talk all damn day. I'm not interested in it. What I'm interested about is like, what are you actually doing, right? What are you doing for liberation? What are you doing to have an impact in your community? What are you doing to raise up people that you hold and care for, right? So yes, it's all in there. I love that. We're going to be real about it. Yeah. Okay, other questions? Okay. So I just gave this as an example. It won't apply to all the co-ops, but I hope that it might serve to provide some kind of construct. So Cooperative Z has a mission to create more cooperatively owned housing communities. And the last
one of the things, Pete, this is Jahan.
yeah,
One of
come
the
on in.
things that I think about is, you know, if you're applying to grants or funding so that you don't have to charge people for your service or your space or experience. And then this conversation that, you know, if you don't have a price to something, people don't value it.
Yep.
So right now, I have definitely things that I share with my community and my neighborhood for free, but I'm not at a point where I can do free programming. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah. A lot of times how this gets handled, and this kind of goes back to a question previously, is in kind. So if the service that you're offering, let's say you're doing massage work, for example, if the service that you're providing, or cooking a meal for folks, right? If the service you're providing was being charged for, what would that rate be? So if you go out and you say, okay, and I'm making up numbers, but let's say an hour-long massage, typically it's $125. So when you're writing that grant or you're doing that application, you can say, right, this is the base price that the market, right, values this activity at. This is how many massages I provided. Let's say you provided 10, because that's why I have a calculator. So let's say that you've provided $1,250 of in-kind service, right? So that grant and you having a market value assigned to it is one way that you can show in market what this would be worth. Now, what I know, living in Powderhorn, and what I think a lot of people know, is there's a lot of people that are hurting. Am I going to do some kind of cost benefit analysis for like letting somebody use my bathroom who's unhoused and living in the park, or, you know, hooking somebody up with a meal that obviously is hungry and, you know, I've been chatting with for 10 minutes, like, hey, why don't you come get something to eat? I'm making sandwiches or whatever, you want one. I'm not going to assign value to that, but I could be like, well, sewer charges $7.99 for the sandwich. So if I wanted to have a cost benefit analysis, I could use that number. So I would say, if it's with an eye towards a grant, or if it's with an eye towards understanding and articulating your value for the sake of having some container to hold that, that's how I would look at it. I would look at a similar service. I would just Google it, come up with a number, and use that to articulate the value. What we know is that love, care, safety, generosity, compassion don't have numbers attached to them. We also know that this is the moment we're in. And so as we extricate ourselves from that, we still have to pay rent and eat. So it is holding those two realities, those two truths, that allow for us to come up with something better. At least I hope so. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, I just, just something that I think about, just something I really think about, because I definitely am doing, like, applying for grants to pay for, say, the programming that I'm striving for, to pay for the supplies for those things. I have, a lot of the things that I do in my space are coming from my other, out of my own pocket, from my other, jobs and things like that. But it's, I definitely see that as a model with other places, and that, just like that cards that we have, just, may not be on that level where I can have free programming because maybe other people are supported with fiscal sponsors and things like that. So it's a process. So I appreciate it. It's something I think about.
Right. And, we talk about this all the time. People of color are expected to provide free labor. That's how this country was built. Let's be 100% real about it. So how people, unfortunately, we frequently, and I say this as a white, queer, cisgendered woman, one of the things I had to learn was how to teach people my value. Right. And so I had to find some peace, some path forward that allowed me to articulate my value and then stand firm in it, understanding not everybody was going to share that same value that I hold, and keep moving, right? So I also think, I hope this is a space where everyone can think about both their values and their value, because I think that that's important. And unfortunately, we live in a world that has values and values really messed up. So we have to think about how we want to present in that way, Yeah, that's helpful. Other questions from the chat or other comments in the chat?
I see a comment from a Shahid, but I think anyway, I might be responding to Jahan. I'm not really sure. Financial statements measure financial worth, not social, cultural, or spiritual worth.
That's real. That's absolutely real. Yep. Okay, well, let's talk about this. And then I have a couple links and let's keep getting in it. These are really great questions. And I really appreciate you all being with me in this. So for Cooperative Z, it's a housing cooperative who wants to create more cooperatively owned housing communities. In the last member meeting, so everyone that's currently living in cooperatively owned housing communities is part of this Cooperative Z. These 3 key performance indicators were established for the upcoming fiscal year, which is like whatever their financial year is, right? January to December, July 1 through June 30, whatever their financial year is. So the goal was to grow the membership by 25 members, increase the revenue of the cooperative by 35%, and decrease the number of cooperative resignations by 10%, right? So the idea is, how are we inviting more people into cooperative housing? How are we growing the rents enough to cover not only the basics of covering the mortgage, but planning ahead for repair and maintenance so that people are living in well cared for and healthy environments, right? And then how do we stop people from leaving? Like, is there something going on that we need to tend to ensure that this continues to be a healthy environment for the long haul for the folks that are involved? So those are KPIs. So I wanted to talk a little bit and kind of get to know you all a little bit better. So I had a couple of discussion questions, and it's new material, but have you all thought about like what you want to measure in your cooperatives, or kind of any indicators that your cooperative is growing or thriving in the direction or the way that you all want them to?
From Mujahid in the chat, we would like to measure the number of visitors to the land.
Awesome. Okay. That's great. That makes sense. I like that. So if you don't have any yet, this is my pitch to get some and to not do it alone. All right. So this is always an opportunity to be engaged with folks in your community, potential co-op members. What is it that if it were possible, it would feel, live, experience as success to you, right? That's why I'm tying it all the way back to the beginning. Each of us within the construct of our cooperatives and our communities have the ability to choose different key performance indicators than the ones we're presented. In my world, being able to buy crap, and maybe that's like my 15th pair of shoes. Maybe that's like the extra 14th or 30th winter coat I don't need. My ability to purchase those things is no longer a key performance indicator to me. What's of value to me is, you know, can I bring my kid home anytime she needs to come home when she's having a rough time with her mental health, right? Can I have a car that's reliable enough so I can go visit my family, like my aunt who's 73 and lives in Kansas City, Missouri? Like, I need to be able to get to her. So my key performance indicators are about how I am able to facilitate closeness and care within my family of origin and my chosen family. How available am I financially to support them and care for them when they need it? That's my key performance indicator.
A farm called home in the chat. A farm called home has KPIs built into the goals of our business plan. Our goals are segmented into immediate, lifestyle, financial, and environmental.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, and I think that's a really great point too. Your key performance indicators don't have to just be financial, right? They can be your relationship to the land. They can be your ability maybe to support a nonprofit that you're also founding at the same time, right? So that's a great example of how it doesn't have to just be anchored in financials. Thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. All right, any others? Okay, well, let's talk about cash for your co-ops. So I wanted to talk with you all. I'm going to sit down now because I'm not young. That's what I'm going to say. So one of the things I talked about with folks when I'm working on new co-ops is like, how do you get money, right? So one of the challenges we have is right now we're working with St. Paul to create some funds available for cooperatives. So the resources I'm going to present to you guys today are for, or you folks today, I don't need to bring gender into the equation. So is for Hennepin County and is for City of Minneapolis. So those are the constraints. And most of it is not available for housing cooperatives. So these are other kinds of cooperatives. All I'm going to say is don't hate the player, hate the game. We're going to walk through what's available. I'll answer any questions that you may have. And you may know of these resources, but I just wanted to make sure, because some of it's a little newer, that you all knew they were out there. And if they're available for you, great. And if not, let's keep pushing to get more. So one is the Co-op Creation Fund. And this is a partnership between Shared Capital, which is a CDFI, and the City of Minneapolis. So, and CDFI is Cooperative Development Fund. So they've approved 300,000 in ARPA funds. So it is available for up to 25,000. You can break a $25,000 grant into $5,000 increments. So let's say you just need to work with an attorney to file your articles with the state and get your cooperative registered. That can be between $5,000 and $10,000, and you can apply just for either $5,000 or $10,000 to pay the attorney to get your articles set and maybe review your bylaws to make sure that they're taken care of. Or let's say that you need the full 25,000 because you found a space and you need to pay 20,000 down to get that space. These funds are available for that. So you can ask for up to $25,000 in $5,000 increments. And if you go to BTAP or you just Google the Co-op Creation Fund, it gives you all the details. This is not available for housing cooperatives, but it is available for other kinds of co-ops. CTAP, which you all probably know a lot about. These are all the services. Right now, Nexus, like the Shared Ownership Center, operates with some CTAP funding. So I can provide up to 50 hours of free services to folks to help set up bylaws, to do a basic financial statement, to do that kind of planning. So these are all the different kinds of things that you can engage folks with CTAP. And so you can do business plan writing, legal services, financial feasibility, member recruitment, governance and board training. I've also done some board training under CTAP. setting your organizational culture. So if you want to have like a deeper dive, like maybe with your co-op members, like a 2-hour study session on building out your KPIs and really hashing out what it is that you want to do in relationship to your mission, that can get covered. Marketing. So there's a number of kind of areas that people can help with. One of the things I'm going to say is that can be exciting and overwhelming. CTAP just opened up their applications for 23-24. We're applying for that. So what I'm going to say is like, digest the cohort you're in. I've worked with Nikuli for several years now. I've had the privilege of working with Liana for several months. You are in a space where you are learning a lot. Don't try and do all the things with all the people all at once, right? Absorb what you can absorb, get clear on your plan, and then understand what it is you're asking for. And again, once you all finish this piece of your cohort and your graduation happens, we've worked internally and we keep trying to think like, okay, how do we support you in your next phase? So don't feel like this is a grab that you got to do all at once, but just know that these resources are available, and CTAP's going to be available for you in the 23-24 fiscal year, which goes from, I believe, April through the end of March. The other one, the shared capital, it's $300,000 until the fund is used up. As far as I know, they have not spent most of this money. So I believe there's at least $200,000 still available. So again, just be intentional when you create more work for yourself that you're ready to activate that work. So there are plenty of resources out here, so take your time. The other one is Elevate. So Elevate is for all of Hennepin County. So if you're out in the Brooklands, anywhere in Hennepin County, these resources are available. If you go to the Elevate Hennepin County website and you walk through Find an Elevate Advisor, there's like 30 different advisors on there, and it gives you a rundown of all the resources they have. There's also marketing, financial planning, cooperative planning. So if for some reason you can't access CTAP or you've already used those funds, Elevate is another resource for you. So just know that there are ecosystem funds out there. And to the degree that we can help, I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to be gone the next 2 weeks. Happy to help, just not in the next 2 weeks. But for real, as you guys get closer to graduation with your cohort, if these conversations are bubbling up, Nikuli and Liana, we can talk, let me know, and we can kind of move some of these opportunities to the forefront too. And so again, Elevate, business planning, financial modeling, legal consulting, and marketing, all those resources are available. All right. So that's what I got today. The last thing I want to show you, all of our contact information is here. And then I wanted to talk a little bit. This UK co-op is the KPI report. And so that model that I pulled was from that. And there's also a lot more information in that report on key performance indicators. The other thing I wanted to share with you was from the Maroon University study group I attended. And it's a really fantastic article called Solidarity Rising. So it talks about sort of this evolution of capitalism, cooperatives, solidarity economy, where they overlap, where the challenges and tensions live. And so to dive deeper into that idea of like separating from the capitalist model, what does that look like? It's a really great read to get you started. So I hope that's of value. All right, everything else is y'all. What can I answer? What can I help with? How are we done?
I was just gonna name, because I know we definitely have some out-of-state folks too, that Shared Capital is a national cooperative lender and funder. So Nexus is connected to Shared Capital. So if you ever wanted to connect with them, I'm happy to make that introduction. Or in the past, we've even gone to meetings with people to try to figure out some stuff if you don't want to hold that space just by yourself. I knew Christina was giving out this list, so yeah, there's some additional lists for national funders. I know there's some artists in here. CCI Arts, it's a great cooperative. Well, they are a nonprofit that grants to cooperatives, and they love artist co-ops. or if they have like artists in housing or something. And then some of these are also membership based, like the Federation of Southern Cooperatives or the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And I know it says worker co-ops on there, but they do have a great resource list database too.
Yep.
Sorry, I'll hand it back to Christina.
No, that's great. Keep talking. I'm just nodding in agreement. That's all I got. I'll drop in so US Federation of Cooperatives, they're of worker cooperatives, they're fantastic. Happy Earth Cleaning Co-op, we've been working with them for a couple of years. We just did kind of a post Thrive, which we worked with them for 2 years to kind of help the co-op get up and running. Pandemic hit, a bunch of the original founders dropped out. And we just did a reset with them of like recruitment, meeting with the new team, bringing people in. So now they're up to 10 members, which is half of their staff. And that is the minimum requirement that at least half the staff that are working at your co-op be worker members. And so they just joined the federation. And they have tons of resources on financials, membership, all kinds of stuff. So I dropped that in the chat too. They're great. I'm very excited for every one of you to be cooperators. It makes me feel like I'm part of a really awesome, good-looking, smart family. All right. I know I talk fast. It's 1:30. Yeah, y'all are welcome. I'm happy to give you all time back, but I don't want you to feel rushed. So I'll look to you all. Awesome. Thanks, Serena.
All right, Sarita hopped off. Any other questions? After this, we're just going to do our closing and head off. So if you do have questions for Christina, and Christina is at Nexus, so if you did want to talk to her at a different time, if you're still digesting all of that information, I know numbers, I don't like numbers. So when I see numbers, my head goes a little. So if you need time, please have all the time you need, and you can circle back when you're ready to. And Christina has agreed to share the slides, offer to share the slides. So if you need to like sit down with those slides and then come back, we're really excited to work with WI and SOCAN about like how to have some more TA for North Star. So she's a great resource.
All right, I'm going to jump off. Power to the people, and I look forward to hearing from any and all of you. It's really an open invitation, so thank you so much, and thank you for Liana and Nikuli for holding such a great space. I appreciate you.
Thanks for coming and joining us.
Thank you, Christina.
Yep, I'll see y'all when I get back. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. It has been a day. So I know you just unmuted, but I'm gonna hand it back to Liana to help us close out. And we'll make sure to follow up and send those resources. Oh, and I did see the Cash App, sorry. I should have mentioned that. I'll mention that to Christina about the Cash App tip. Yeah.
Thanks, Nikuli. So I'm going to put the link to the evaluation in the chat. I know we've absorbed a lot, taken in a lot, so no pressure to do it now, but just offering it so we can continue to evaluate and improve in making this a space that works. So I'll drop the link to the survey in the chat. And I guess I just want to open it up if anybody has any final thoughts, reflections, things they'd like to share to kind of close out our time. We can share that.
I wonder if so I was really right away when we started this morning, which somehow feels like 30 minutes ago. Y'all had spoken briefly about how Nexus has some alumni funding, and how is that funding similar to sort of what Elevate and the Co-op Creation Fund is designed to do?
Yeah, so the Nexus Alumni Fund was created, I want to say like maybe cohort 2, cohort 3. After this, we were having conversations about like how we have like this 6-7 month fellowship, and then it's like, go start your cooperatives, and that's not really realistic, especially when people are still facing so many barriers with like getting stuff off with like financing or whatever else. So the fund is there. Where I think we need to update some of the language on it. And I think I said that as I gave it to a different fellow a couple weeks ago, but essentially it's there for people to tap into if you need to pay for TA support. Like if it's not at Nexus, we'll refer out to people in community. So like if you want to pay for yeah, absolutely. Sorry. If you want to pay for like a lawyer for your bylaws, then we could look at the alumni fund to see how to access the alumni fund for those services. Or if, I don't know, if you're all having a fundraiser, so it's open. Okay, what do you mean by only TA? Maybe, yes, like,
Technical assistance.
yes. Only technical assistance. Well, technical assistance and other things too. I think we try to make it a little like flexible. So let's say you were trying to have an advisory committee meeting where you're inviting community members to learn more about your work, and you maybe wanted to feed them or pay them stipends. Like people have tapped into that fund to do that. So I think it's like the technical assistance portions, but also what it would take to develop this fund, develop your cooperative. I will say that our alumni fund is not large enough to, and this is like an issue that I've had and talked with folks at Nexus, that it's not large enough to like fund housing cooperatives right now. That's the dream, to be able to like direct all those funds to housing cooperatives. So like hopefully down the line we can get more funding to support that work. But yeah, right now it's, if you need to have someone like design your website, you can use the alumni funds to pay for that. If you need a lawyer, like I said, if, I don't know, you are doing a land study for some new land, then, or I don't know, feasibility studies, etc. So it is, right now, I feel like we need to update the language. But yeah, it's kind of supposed to be open and flexible for the members of North Star. Just recognizing that, as we continue this work, there still may be barriers, and so this is one way to try to like kind of get rid of whatever barriers that we can get rid of in this process. So people have asked for, let me see, like I remember once we sat at the office, but like someone like registered for the fund, and it wasn't like $5,000 to $10,000. So I registered for their cooperative on like the Minnesota whatever. I think that was like $60. So we've had anywhere from $60 to $10,000 in requests. It really depends on what you're looking for and how much we have in the budget. I will say that right now the alumni fund is at $42,000. I will name that. It's at $42,000. So that's what we have to work with for the year. So if you just look at $0 to $10,000, that's about where people have been floating around in the alumni fund, and it's also open to all of our cohort members. So yeah. Any other questions? But I don't know if, I'm hoping we're gonna be able to send that that little info sheet out this week, or just have to update it before we do that, because I do think it's a little dated. And I know like this is Minnesota specific information because that's like kind of where we work, but we do have some folks that are out of state too. So like, because you came through North Star, you're part of our North Star / Nexus family. And so you still have access to whatever funding is in Nexus North Star particularly. I will also name that, yeah, we have that fund. We have the the fiscal sponsorship, and Nexus does also do re-granting. And so we have given out grants to cooperatives too in the past. It just kind of depends on like what's in the budget at the time, but we could talk more about that too if you have questions. And those have been a little bit more higher. It's under 50, like maybe under 30. But and we've also given out, someone asked about nonprofit and cooperative, like we've given out to one of those nonprofit/cooperatives. They asked for like preferred stock instead of a grant. So we've also like done preferred stock into a cooperative to help build equity instead of a regular grant. So we're always down to explore, learn, and try to be creative about these things. And I think our previous finance director kind of helped start us off with that, and trying to see where we can move forward with that too in more creative ways so that the financing is not limited. You're welcome. Anything else before we close out? I was gonna say, I don't know. I know maybe have looked at that presentation guide, and maybe it's something that Juhan said earlier about like listing your services and pricing your services. Please do so. Please also, if you're not if only this, but I'm thinking of artists in particular because that's who this comes to mind. But for folks that are doing consulting work or anything else, please make sure you put like, if you're like paying yourself, make sure you pay yourselves in these processes too. So please make sure you name that as you like start thinking about grants and other things, or yeah, or seeing like what that nonprofit does. For example, yes, Nexus, we have like this wellness in our, like it's part of our values. And so we have like a wellness fund and other things. And we've been able to like do re-granting to other organizations that do that. So if that's like going to be a KPI for you, make sure you're looking for funders or lenders that also will value and acknowledge that too, so that that's listed in your work, because we need to rest too. So yes, please make sure you pay yourselves in this process as well, as you're doing this work, because can't do this co-op work for free. As much as we'd love to, someone has to pay the bills. All right. Maybe one word answer, one word of like how you're leaving today from folks. Please either unmute or put it in the chat and we'll head out. See, Olivia said hopeful. Nervous excitement, processing. Overwhelmed, yep. Cool. I'll think whirlwind. Yep, that's another good one. Yeah. Whirlwind, blustering blaze. All right, y'all. So thank you for sharing space with us again today. Our next session is in April. I want to say it's governance and bylaws. So we're working to hopefully bring this amazing group out of Oakland and a lawyer. We're hoping to bring on a Black lawyer to help us work through that. And please make sure you do the things for the one-on-ones. We'd love to chat, talk, and figure out how things are going. And please take a look at the presentation guides Maybe we can make space at our next session to think about like what that will look like for our presentations in May. Thank you all. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and please take care and refer to like whatever nourishes you for the rest of this weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, take care.